This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. I've not figured out this jet lag thing. If I leave Asia, I go to the States, I take 2 flights. I'm in the air for 20 hours combined total time. I get to the States and I'm whacked. 5 to 7 days. Cognitive dysfunction. I might as well be a zombie. I have no earthly idea who I am, what I'm doing. Who knows? But I roll with the punches, go with the flow, let it happen. Hopefully I'm not Xing off too many years of my life with this global gallivanting around. But it's fun. If you're not traveling, if you're not getting around, if you're not going to the other side of the planet, regardless of what side of the planet you started on, can I ask what's wrong with you? Please, my gosh, get up and move. Go make it happen. Wake it up. Wake up the interior. Wake up the soul. And I love guests. You're not going to stay with me, but I'll share dinner with you if you're normal. I mean, if you've got something to say, if you're an interesting person, I've met plenty of them across Asia. They come and find me. It's always an enjoyable time. Maybe occasionally I've met 1 or 2 nut jobs that have looked me up. But most of the people that I've come in contact with are some really stellar individuals, high achievers, interesting people. I love it. That's life. Again, make it happen. Go someplace. Find someone new. Connect. Wake it up. Don't just become a fat piece of shit. You don't want to be a fat piece of shit. And I don't only say that physically. Mentally, you don't want your mind to be a fat piece of shit. So as I circumnavigate the world, the globe, I happen to have picked up one of my more favorite books over the last 10 years, Risk Savvy by Gerd Gigerenzer. One of the more interesting guys I've had on this podcast. He has been on 2 times. I'm going to fill in right now and reach back into my archives for my 2nd interview with Gerd. This is the kind of guy that wins a Nobel Prize. His kind of aha moment. Those things that he's figured out that maybe look clear once he's told us about them, but before it's a little fuzzy, it's a little hazy. So I give Gerd all the credit for his work, and I really enjoy having him on this show, and hopefully I will have him on again in the near future for episode number 3. But for right now, let you enjoy reaching back into my archives with Gerd Gigerenzer. Hey, Gerd, how are you?
I'm fine. And where are you?
I'm in Saigon today.
In Saigon?
Yes.
So, what are you doing there?
Today, I'm just doing this fine podcast interview with you. But no, I've been spending the last probably 18 months in Asia at various different countries. Yeah. So living and working and back and forth to America as well.
Okay, that may be a very useful experience.
Absolutely. In fact, it makes you very aware of some of the subjects that you're talking about in your book. Your newest book, Risk Savvy. So it's let me jump right into that though. Let me what I would love for you to explain for the audience is I know you have a good-natured collegial debate with Daniel Kahneman on his perspective, but I wonder if you could outline your perspective and perhaps the difference at how you both see the big picture.
Let's start with the commonalities. So we both believe that people use heuristics, that is, simple rules to make decisions, at least in many situations. The disagreement starts because Daniel Kahneman and many of his followers believe that heuristics are always second best. and that statistics would always give you the right answer. And this is an error. In a world of uncertainty, where you cannot calculate all the risks, statistics and optimization doesn't help. I mean, it brings you to some point, but you never know what is the best solution. And in that kind of problems, heuristics can do very well, as we have shown. Not only do people use heuristics, but heuristics can often be better than so-called optimal. And that leads to a new perspective about heuristics, that they not only can describe how people make decisions, but also prescribe. That is a normative perspective of heuristics that poses the question, can we describe the environment, the situation, in which a simple heuristic, such as divide your money equally over the N assets, can outperform so-called optimization models. And this is the study of ecological rationality.
It is terribly fascinating. I thought there's some fantastic examples. People are definitely going to have to check out your book because we only have a few minutes here today, or at least 30, 40 minutes maybe to chat. But I thought there's some examples to really get people to understand your direction and where your research has gone. And one of the great ones in this new book is the notion of medical checkups. I can't tell you how many, even young people, they'll tell me, hey, I can go to this really cool hospital and I can get a full body scan, perfectly healthy 30-something-year-old person. And they're going to get full body scans looking for every possible thing that can go wrong. You're welcome to address that, but I would love for you to dig into the notion of the PSA test for men, because I do have a lot of men listeners, and frankly, a lot of men that perhaps are of the age where they need to at least ponder the idea of a PSA test. Why don't you talk about the issue of the medical checkup and that test, and that perhaps we've gone a little overboard?
Yeah. So part of my book is about situations where you can actually calculate the risks very clearly, and cancer screening is a good example for that. A PSA test is a test that is about early detection of prostate cancer. Now, in that situation, many Americans don't really think about whether they should participate in PSA testing or not. And rather follow a heuristic like, if you see a white coat, then, do whatever he or she is telling you. So the trusty doctor heuristic. That's a heuristic when doctors know the medical evidence, when doctors don't have conflicts of interest, and when they don't practice defensive decision-making, that is, they protect themselves against you as a potential plaintiff. None of these three conditions holds in the U.S. and also not in many other Western countries. So that means the heuristic trust your doctor is not ecologically rational. And here you need to think yourself. The evidence for PSA tests is quite clear. We do not have evidence that lives are saved. There's a little controversy on whether PSA testing reduces mortality from prostate cancer, maybe between 1 in 1,000 or maybe 0 in 1,000, but in total mortality and in total cancer mortality, there's no evidence that there's any difference. But the consequence of this test can be terrible for many men. For instance, most men who have prostate cancer, and that's quite frequent, the older you get, and if you're lucky to live a long life, you almost certainly have some form of prostate cancer. Say 80% of 80-year-olds have some form of prostate cancer, but only 3% die from prostate cancer. So if everyone goes screening and the condition is detected, most of these cancers are only technically cancer, but are not clinically relevant. You die with the cancer, not from the cancer. So, and then there is treatment, and maybe half or so of men being treated end up incontinent for the rest of their lives and impotent in addition. So this is why the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force recommends against routine prostate cancer screening. Nevertheless, many doctors and clinics recommend prostate cancer screening. And this is for one of these three reasons. Many doctors we have studied don't know the medical evidence. Second, they have conflicts of interest. So clinics earn money from doing the tests and more money from the consequences to surgery, which is, as I said, often unnecessary surgery. And third, there are conflicts, there's defensive decision-making. So many doctors who themselves would never take a PSA test recommend the PSA test to their patients because they want to protect themselves against the patient as the potential plaintiffs. So they don't want to deal with the situation that eventually most men who get old get some kind of prostate cancer and they might sue the doctor for not having done the PSA test. So this is a very interesting situation. And we develop so-called fact boxes that actually have been originally developed by Lisa Schwartz and Stephen Woloshin in Dartmouth College and have made their way into the Obama healthcare law, but they're never being published. And that is what I think one of the big tools in healthcare to help doctors and patients understand what the medical evidence is. So such a fact box just shows you by using icons like smiling faces and sad faces what happens to 100 men who participate in PSA tests and those who don't 10 years later. And then you can see in mortality, no life is saved, but about 20 of every 100 men suffer from taking the tests, either by having false positives and unnecessary biopsies or by having actually a non-progressive version of prostate cancer and being treated unnecessarily.
I think you're getting at the heart of what risk savvy is all about, is that when you're going to take risks, do you follow your instincts or is it expert advice? Instincts or expert advice? Gut or expert advice? That's what it comes down to, doesn't it?
Yeah, and with expert advice, you need to be very careful because you need to analyze whether these situations, the conditions that I just mentioned hold, whether the expert knows the evidence, whether there is conflict of interest. The expert may make a choice between giving you the best advice and losing money, and defensive decision-making. On PSA, the man who discovered PSA, Richard Ablin, recently said that no man should routinely take PSA tests. And he ended up saying that I never dreamed, that's a quotation, that my discovery 4 decades ago would lead to such a profit-driven public health disaster. Yeah. And it's here what I mean, what risk savvy is about, to learn to make informed decisions and also to relax with your anxieties and take the remote control of your emotions again in your own hands.
You know, one of the things that you've brought up in this work, GERD, too, in your other work is the big question. What is the absolute risk increase? And I have a personal example that I'd like to share with you. So there was a debate online between groups of people that were traveling a lot. They were debating traffic fatalities in the United States versus Thailand. And it was 38 per 100,000 in Thailand are killed, and 11 per 100,000 in the United States are killed. And some people immediately read that and said, oh my gosh, it's 4 times more dangerous to drive in Thailand. And I was like, but hold on, the absolute numbers are pretty close, 38 to 11. per 100,000 people. So it seemed like to me a classic example of looking at the relative comparison and not thinking about the absolute risk.
That's a well-known trick, if you say so, to use relative numbers when absolute numbers would give you a very different picture. And the same trick is used, for instance, in cancer screening, where to take another example, take mammography screening. What we know is that out of 1,000 women age 50 who don't participate in screening, 10 years later, about 5 of them die from breast cancer. And among 1,000 women who participate in screening, that's 4. So the reduction is from 5 to 4 out of every 1,000, or in other words, 1 out of 1,000. But that's usually not told to women, but they learn that breast cancer screening reduces mortality from breast cancer by 20%, from 5 to 4 in 1,000. Often rounded up to 30 or 35%. I've analyzed the brochures. So, the latter has been typical in the UK. In the US, most brochures don't give even numbers because the assumption is that women are frightened of numbers, or maybe they're enumerate, or whatever the assumption is. So American women, most of the time, get no numbers at all about the benefit. They get other numbers that are irrelevant, but not about the benefit. So here we have another case where relative numbers are used to evoke or to mislead people about the benefit of medication. Another example is the Lipitor advertisement that if you take Lipitor or another cholesterol-reducing drug, then you reduce your risk of a stroke by 50%. Isn't that good, 50%? The studies show that out of 100 men or women who are already at high risk because otherwise there's no evidence that these drugs help at all, out of 100 high-risk persons who don't take the drug, so 2 get a stroke, and that reduces to 1. So that effect, 50%, is the same as 1 percentage point. So here we have, these are simple tools that everyone could learn. Always ask, what's the absolute risk? And don't listen or get impressed by relative numbers.
Hey, Gerd, let me ask you to go in a slightly different direction, which is the notion of romance and getting married. And I'll have to tell you how you were on my show last year, but I was in a bookstore in Singapore and I was with my girlfriend. And I looked up and I saw your book there and I said, oh, this is a really interesting guy. He was on my podcast last year. I picked up the book. Now, mind you, this is girlfriend, not married. I pick up the book and I open it. And the very first page I open to is the Benjamin Franklin part talking about building a ledger. And so I started laughing to myself. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure what's going on here. How did this just happen? And so I had to read her the passage. But anyways, why don't you explain what Franklin's thinking was in the ledger and maybe talk about some of the heuristics that apply and have been successful in the notion of romance?
Okay, so Benjamin Franklin, he gave the recipe how to make rational decisions. It's basically the pro and contra list. And that what later became what every business school or economics school teaches, the maximization of expected utility. In a famous letter to his nephew, he explains him to how, if in doubt, set down all the reasons, pro and con, and so on, and weigh them. And then he ends, by the way, if you do not learn it, I apprehend you will never be married. So this is now the received theory. So I have nothing against adding and weighing and pros and cons lists, but they work in a world where you can foresee, you can predict the future very well, in a world of known risk, but not so much in the world of unknown risk, and that in relationships, all kind of things happen that you never foresaw. And I also have asked many of my friends who are economists, mostly men, how they made their own decision about whom to marry. The universal answer was, no, we didn't follow our own theory. I found only one economist who said, of course, I followed my own theory. And he told me that he listed all the alternatives, all the consequences, such as, will you let me work in peace and take care of the children? And then he estimated the probabilities for each of these women that this will actually happen, multiplied it by the utilities, and made the calculation and proposed to the women with the highest expected utility. She accepted. He never told her how to do it. Now they're divorced, but that happens to many people. And some people may laugh about that, but think for a moment. The problem that expected utility theory maximization is proposed as the recipe for everything, for every decision. It's basically statistics, as if statistics would be the answer to everything. Statistics is an enormous important tool, but it works in situations where you can actually be sure that you can predict the world very well. Another thing is modern dating sites use this kind of algorithm for matching partners and weighing hundreds of personality characteristics for the perfect date. I mean, that makes me shudder because it's, how would you be able to predict that? And I would bet that these modern dating sites will not have more success than even the classic way where someone experienced who knows you very well would have made the decision for you, as it's still the case in many Asian countries.
Yeah.
And there's certainly no evidence that these dating site algorithms lead to romantic relations that are superior to traditional ways of finding partners and lead to kissing fewer frogs.
Well, I think not only is it perhaps crazy that there's a prediction that this can work, maybe it's even more interesting that people actually believe in it.
There is a big movement, and now you're back to the original topic. There's a big movement towards replacing good judgment by algorithms and mistrusting intuitions and good gut feelings. And that's what part of behavioral economics is about. That's what part of the heuristics and biases program is about. You find the statement that human intuition is sometimes good but sometimes bad, which is true, of course. But the statistical optimization models are also sometimes good and sometimes bad. And I think the last financial crisis has made that very clear, that the algorithms of the rating agencies, the value at risk computations that the banks used, created illusions of certainty and prevented no single crisis and predicted none. So we need to think more about a toolbox and not one tool, one hammer that's always right and human intuition is always wrong. That's a big error.
One of the things that I loved in the book as well, you make the point, if an experienced person with a good track record has a strong hunch about a decision, listen to him or her and don't just demand facts.
I've worked with many large companies and asked the managers from through the entire hierarchy into the executive committee, how often is an important professional decision where you're taking part? Usually they don't do it alone, but in groups. How often is this decision a gut decision? If you do these confidential interviews, you get the answer that about every other decision is at the end a gut decision. And a gut decision is not caprice, not something arbitrary, not a sixth sense or God's insight, but it's a form of unconscious intelligence. So these managers have long time experience. And usually they are buried under a mountain of data partially contradicting. And then and there's no algorithm to decide whether you should establish a range in Saigon or not. But if they have a feeling based on their experience where they go, that's a gut decision. And in about half of important decisions in large companies, it's intuition at the end that counts. That means the decision makers can't explain it. But they would never admit to this in public because there's fear of intuition. Because if you make a gut decision, you take the responsibility. And I've observed that in large companies, there are two ways to deal with this anxiety of gut decisions. One is to find reasons after the fact. So an employee is sent to find reasons in the next 2 weeks, and then the decision is presented as a fact-based decision. Or the more expensive version is you hire a consulting firm that finds reasons and presents a 200-page document with PowerPoint. This is all a waste of time, of intelligence, and money, because people have fear to make good intuitive decisions. And one of the reasons is the literature in behavioral economics, in other fields, where people learn that intuitive decisions are suspect. You should mistrust them, and you should trust blindly into logic and probability theory.
Another great example that I think you bring up in your book, that the notion of being risk savvy, upscale restaurants and in ordering. And what's the best way to order food in an upscale restaurant?
Yeah. So I have learned myself from studying risk-taking in the real world to make decisions faster and more relaxed. So when I'm in an upscale restaurant, and I'm often ending up there after giving a talk, one of the heuristics is I don't even open the menu, but I ask the waiter what he or she would eat this evening here. I don't ask the waiter what she would recommend me, because then she would start to think, oh, that's a German guy, what do Germans eat? And I'm the wrong way. And in a good restaurant, the waiter knows what's happening in the kitchen and what's best today. And I've never regretted this kind of decision. And it leaves you time for conversation. And while many of my dear friends, they cannot not open a menu, and they try to maximize, go through everything and every other piece and every word. And then they often end up with something which is really second best.
It's a great tip, though. It's a great piece of insight.
And it's a simple heuristic. It just illustrates there are many of these heuristics where you actually usually are better off than trying to maximize.
You know, Gerd, one last thing here to expand on, which I think is a really big picture point. And this isn't meant to be a knock at anybody else in the field or anything, but I've seen you say that you viewed risk savvy as an alternative to a flood of popular books that say we're foolish and irrational and that there's not much that can be done about us. But you seem to be making a case in our brief conversation today that there are ways with smart gut judgments that you can navigate much more effective.
Yes. I mean, the risk savvy is what I think the alternative to the view that we are hopeless in taking risks and need to be nudged by governments or other authorities into better behavior. This is not my view of a democracy or of the 21st century. It's old-fashioned paternalism. And also a kind of view of humans as that it's more Homo Simpsons. So we have shown that in order to be risk savvy, you need basically two kind of tools. If the situation is one where you can calculate the risk, then you need statistical thinking. And we have shown that despite the flood of publications in the heuristics and biases tradition that try to show again and again that people seem to fail some standards, that we can teach already fourth graders to do complicated statistical inferences that are called Bayesian inference. And most of the fourth graders that we have studied in Germany, in China, can learn this in a blink. While, for instance, Danny Kahneman, still in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, believes or claims that people would basically not be able to do this because of some mystical system one, or as Thaler and Sunstein in the book Nudge claim that they compare these so-called illusions like the base rate fallacy to visual illusions as suggesting that nobody could unlearn them. This is a big error. And in situation where one cannot calculate the risk, one needs good heuristics. And both of these tools is what can make people risk savvy. That doesn't mean that one always makes the best decision, simply because in a world of uncertainty, nobody can know ahead what the best decision will be. But in general, I see my book Risk Savvy also as a political statement for the 21st century that we should invest more in people rather than blaming them and trying to find ways to nudge them. For instance, many of my colleagues think it's impossible to educate people out of their so-called cognitive illusions. Just think ahead, a few centuries ago, few people would have believed that we can ever succeed to teach everyone how to read and to write. The 20th century has managed this in the Western countries. And in the same way, I would bet any money I have that if we only try, we can teach everyone to become risk savvy. And we have shown this at a very young age. And we even can teach doctors to understand medical evidence. I have trained American U.S. federal judges and lawyers in understanding DNA evidence. They all can learn that. There's nothing inborn, misfired in our brain. We have problems, more problems in some ways, but we often can find good representations to understand risks better.
You know, one of the things, and I'll leave you with this, Gerd, one of the things that I love about your work as a former baseball player is the gaze heuristic. But I was thinking even a derivative of that type of heuristic. I used to be a baseball catcher. So let's say the pitcher's throwing the ball in, there's a man on first base, and he's attempting to steal. So we can think of the numbers of calculations going on here. A pitcher's throwing the ball 90 miles an hour. The guy is running from first to second as hard as he can, and I have to catch the ball and throw it down 120 some odd feet to hopefully get him out. There's so many things going on there, but you don't think about it. You just, you stand up, you see the glove down there at second base, and you throw the ball, and you throw it as hard as you can, trying to hit the glove. But you don't do all the trajectories and the calculations in your brain. It's a heuristic of just playing the sport and playing the game.
That's correct. The gaze heuristic is one heuristic that baseball players and also cricket players and soccer goals use. And the point is that usually people think this is a complex problem, how to catch a ball, so we need a complex solution. What would be the complex solution be? Yeah, somehow the unconscious calculates the trajectory of the ball by solving differential equations. A number of experts have shown that experienced baseball players do something very different. So the gaze heuristic is one of the heuristics they use that works if the ball is already high up in the air. And you just fixate the ball, second start running, and third, adjust your running speed so that the angle of gaze remains constant. And then you end up there where the ball is coming down. This heuristic can ignore all the information that you would need to calculate the trajectory, including wind, spin, the original distance the ball was kicked or thrown, and so on. And it focuses only on one good reason, which is the angle of gaze. So complex problems can often be solved by simple heuristics. In this case, by just focusing on the one important piece and ignoring the rest.
Well, Gert, I highly recommend the book Risk Savvy. Everyone can find it on every Amazon site around the world or their local bookstores. What bookstores are still left, but Amazon is going to have it everywhere. And and also the Max Planck Institute, they can find additional work about you there as well, correct?
Okay. Michael, it was a pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely. I'm hopefully going to do this maybe once a year, Gert. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.